As we are marking the 50th Victory Day of Bangladesh today, it's a very special moment for me personally to represent what has been happening in Bangladesh in the social entrepreneurship scene. Today, I'm thanking YY Ventures for making this collaboration happen. Before we move to the facilitator today with me, Mr. Tazin, who is the CEO of YY Ventures, I'd like to share a bit about YY Ventures. So it's a social business which works to facilitate other social businesses and social initiatives by accelerating, incubating, and providing impact investment. As of now, the YY venture has started as YY Goshti since the very beginning and grew up into YY Ventures. And today I'll be facilitating this discussion and the masterclass today with Mr. Tazin Shadid, who has been working in quite a diverse sectors. Born and brought up in Bangladesh, Tazin studied in the US and then worked for almost 10 years in Microsoft and other initiatives. And he is also a social entrepreneur by profession and currently working as the CEO of Tazin Shadid. So today with him, we'll be digging deep into the secret recipe of YY Ventures on facilitating the growth of social businesses, learn about what is social business, how it all started from a small village of southern Bangladesh and spread all across the world. What is the secret idea of YY Venture for building the social businesses? So the floor is yours, Mr. Tazin. Feel free to start the sharing. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Shadman, and thank you everyone who are joining today. It's really great to be here. And those of you who are joining from Bangladesh, happy Victory Day. And it's a special day, so it's great to be able to share about Bangladesh and social business in general. So with that, let me just share my screen. Give me just a second here. All right, and Shadman, let me know if you can see my screen and if it's working. All right, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen very well.
All right, awesome. All right. So just to, get started, because at the beginning, we did talk about a little bit about the pandemic, and this is a special year. It's a challenging year. In other times, right now, we would all be there in the same conference room and probably having this in-person talk. I know some of you are lucky to be there, but most of the things are happening virtually. And the reason is the pandemic did expose some of the biggest issues we have, and it's not a surprise. Those of you who have been working on this, we kind of knew for a long time, but the pandemic has just exposed all the vulnerabilities we have as communities with our healthcare, with our food and our employment and our environment. All these issues kind of got exposed, how we need to take care of ourselves. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Bangladesh at the beginning, and then how the concept of social business, and then focus on YY Ventures and what we have done, especially in terms of social innovation and the world of 3 zeros, which is zero poverty, zero unemployment, and zero carbon emission. So to begin with, in Bangladesh, 1 in 5 people live below the poverty line. So poverty is still a big issue. We have done a lot of progress here. We are closely going forward to becoming a middle income country, but yet I would say we still have a long way to go. With that, we also have an unemployment issue with about 2.6 million people unemployed. So that's again another big area and big issue that we need to deal with. And finally, carbon emission, it's a global problem, but Bangladesh is part of it. It has increased by more than 16.5% over the years, and then we are kind of dealing with this. So how does social business kind of work on these 3 things, and what we have done over the years to deal with these things. So for that, I want to take a small kind of trip to the past and talk a little bit about what started as a very, very small initiative in the southern part of Bangladesh in a village called Jobra, where Nobel Peace Laureate Professor Yunus started this initiative of microfinance with only $27 and 42 women. And this story is now well known, so I don't want to reiterate, but that kind of started this whole global movement of microfinance. And that in turn, like in the last like kind of 40 plus years, has become the root of social business as we know it today. And even when we call what is a social business, it's kind of there's a lot of kind of ambiguity around what is social business, because a lot of traditional businesses do work on social impact and social kind of initiatives. But the essence of social business, it's a social mission at its core. That is the number one thing about a social business. It deals with some of the social aspects, some of the toughest social issues of our time. How can we kind of solve those human problems and then go from there? And then comes the profit part and the business model part, which we will share more in a little bit. But if we move back to kind of like, how social business is defined by Professor Yunus, he has this thing called the 7 principles of social business. And the first one is the biggest one, which is like social business is not about profit maximization, which is kind of sometimes business is driven by profit maximization, but social business to its core is about solving problems and not about profit maximization. The next one is the financial and economic sustainability. So social business is not like a charity or an NGO. It does need to be financially and economically sustainable. The third thing is investors. Social business do attract investors, but the investors can only take the investment back. They cannot take any dividend. Again, like a huge difference between traditional business, where you have shareholders, you are distributing profits and dividends. That is not applicable to social business. And when the investment amount is paid back, the profit and whatever comes out of the business must go again, like, into growing and expanding the operation, the scaling up of the services. So that's another big point about social business. It is also has to be gender sensitive and environmentally conscious. Social business cannot take on any initiatives that harms our environment. So that is very, very important. And the other thing is about it is it's not about like, getting some volunteers and then paying like minimum wage, and it has to like, run like a regular business. You have to give market wage and better working conditions. So that's a very, very important aspect of it. And finally, like, I know when Professor Yunus, like on the left, you can see like his handwritten notes, it says like 6 principles, but he added one at the end that says like, do it with joy. And I think that is so important in our, especially for YY Ventures and everyone working on social business, because sometimes we are dealing with some of the toughest issues of our communities, and it can get very heavy. But social business, like when we think about it, like we need to enjoy the process, the journey, and we need to have that joy part of it, the emotional aspect of it. So it's very important that we enjoy what we do. So that's kind of like we say the 7 principles of social business. Now, many of you might be asking, like, what is the difference between social business and social enterprise? Because those are 2 terms we kind of hear so often, because a lot of NGOs even use the term social enterprise. For me personally, I think like the social business and social enterprise depends very much on your location. If we look at the European literature, social business and social enterprise are kind of like, used interchangeably, so they may mean the same thing. However, in the context of Bangladesh and many other places, I think there's a significant difference between social business and social enterprise. Social business focuses on the impact first, and also like, kind of like the 7 principles we talked about. Social enterprise, on the other hand, is the goal is to generate revenue to support charitable activities. Many of the early social enterprises are done through NGOs. For example, BRAC, the largest NGO in started from Bangladesh, but the largest NGO in the world, runs 17 different social enterprises. But as a social enterprise, they're still part of the NGO. They cannot take investments, whereas social business, you are open to taking investments. The only pivot is you cannot give any profit back. You can only give the investment back. So that is a big difference. By the way, like, feel free to type in any questions you have, and then also like, ask questions during the session. We want to make it more interactive and answer questions whenever they arise. So feel free to do that, and I'd request Shadman to kind of like see if there's any questions. Feel free to kind of talk about those. So with that, like, let's move on a little bit and talk about investment in social business, because that's again a very important kind of aspect of social business. As we say, social business can take investments, unlike social enterprise, especially in Bangladesh. And when we talk about social business and investments, a lot of interest we are seeing right now, that people understand that we need to invest in these social businesses and focusing on solving some of the toughest issues of our times. The COVID-19 pandemic has actually given us a lot of kind of exposure to what happens when we only think about profit maximization or regular businesses, because then we are not thinking about environment, when we're not thinking about communities. A lot of organizations run in terms of just how do we maximize our profits and return shareholder value. Whereas like we are seeing a number of investors right now who are very vocal about, no, we need to understand the environmental sustainability, we need to understand the impact we are making in the society. So it's very, very important that, like, and a lot of investors are looking into social businesses now. And if we think of impact investment, again, like, a lot of social impact investment in social business are coming in form of impact investment. And impact investments are specific funds that focus on the impact first and then profit later. And there are different forms of different types of impact investments that are available right now. And we also are seeing a lot of shift in terms of traditional charitable or like, donor agency funds moving into the impact investments. And the reason behind is, when you are invest or donating to charity, it's a one-way thing. You are donating and then that is being used for good causes, but the money doesn't cycle. Whereas like when you're talking about impact investments and the charitable donation that are kind of moving into the impact investment world, you can see the money is being circulated, because the social business or the social enterprise will probably make profit, and then the profit is then reinvested in other ventures or within the same venture and to expand it. So that is really great that that cycle goes on. So it goes on forever if you make an investment. So we're seeing a good trend of donor funds being converted into impact investment. Just a quick look into the difference between traditional investment and impact investment. As you see, like the total investment right now is about 1,400 billion, but out of that, we're seeing 24 billion in impact investment, which is again like not a small portion. And it's great for us who are working in social businesses to see this this shift. And we hope more and more investment will kind of move into the social business sector, because in the traditional investing, again, the goal is to profit maximize. And then of course there are some business organ, they are doing great work in terms of social impact. Whereas like in the impact investment world, it is completely like, reversed, whereas we focus more on impact and less on profit maximization. And again, Shadman, like, if you have any questions come up, like, feel free to
We
ask.
already have quite a good number of questions. Some have been
Okay.
answered already throughout your sharing, but then I would like to put it up so that we can discuss further. So from Katrina, one question is a question about social enterprise. How much needs to be given for it to be considered one? How does that differ from philanthropies that are all about giving?
Mhm. So, so there are three things here. Like, so when you talk about philanthropy, it is just donation. You are just giving it, and it's being used for a service rendered to hopefully to underserved communities or some other aspects of it. Social enterprise, on the other hand, it could be a fully profitable business. It's just the money that is generated from the social enterprise will be invested for charitable activities. In many cases, again, like I'll talk about Bangladesh because there are like three distinct even organizational registration you need. So that makes it's very different than each other. So for a social enterprise, whenever, like, for example, as I say, like BRAC has, for example, 17 social enterprises, and the money that is generated from the profit goes into the other initiatives that are completely charitable, so that they are not always dependent on donors. And that is and still has been one of the key ways for charities to think of how can they be also sustainable, because as donor funds are moving away, and also in Bangladesh becoming a middle income country, less and less donor funds are coming in, charitable funds or philanthropic funds are coming in. So in that case, a social enterprise can provide the funds needed for that charity to run their charitable activities. So that's kind of like, I would say, the difference between like social enterprise, the funds versus the charitable funds. The other thing is like, in Bangladesh, you do not have to have a specific percentage. Going back to the question of like, when you will be considered a social enterprise, it's just the way it is set up, how the organization is set up. For example, YY Ventures is set up as a social business. So everything we do, all the work we do, none of the founders or none of the people involved can take any profit out of it. Everything will kind of be reinvested into the different ventures and invested into other ventures that we support. Any other questions?
So there are other questions. One question, I believe it has been already answered, which is how does one decide to build a social business versus a social enterprise? Are certain contexts more suited for one compared to the other? So it's more about in which context should I go for a social business, or in which context should I go for a social enterprise? So how do we decide that?
I think like you got some idea from the previous slides, but if I kind of like, go directly to the question, it is based on like your intention. For a social business, for us, when we set it up, we knew that we will only work with investors who do not want any profit or don't want to make money out of this. It needs to be like razor sharp. The idea is to just have impact, and then we can get them their investment back, but no profits. When you think of like, again, like a lot of it depends on location. If you think of, as I say, like, the European region, there is no difference in terms of registration or starting a company between which is social enterprise or social business. They're kind of used interchangeably. But in Bangladesh, there is a huge difference between that.
Great. So there's another question from Matthews, which is, does YY Ventures also look to invest in African initiatives? So any plan for Africa? Maybe we can
Yes,
discuss it now,
very
or
good
maybe
question. And
later. But
I'll come towards that later on, but
yeah,
just to answer quickly, yes, we do. So we started as like the reason we wanted to talk a little bit about the microfinance initiative because it started in Bangladesh, kind of grew over the world, and social business, another one of those concepts by Professor Yunus that has been kind of making waves around the globe. In terms of YY Ventures, we kind of come in at a different angle where we focus on early stage startups and how can we kind of invest in them, how can we help them accelerate and incubate. So that one, we already work globally. We do have some projects outside of Bangladesh, but we are thinking of kind of working towards going global, and hopefully our goal is to be by 2025 have a global presence and including Africa.
great. So another question from Armjin, which is, what is the difference between an NGO and an NPO, which is a non-profit organization? Is social business an NGO or NPO? How do we define it?
None of it. A social business is not an NGO, not an NPO, because a social business does make profit. So NPOs, like, are kind of like cannot make any profit. NGOs in Bangladesh, again, NGOs and NPOs are pretty much the same concept. But when you talk about social business, they're registered as a regular business. They're not under the NGO affairs or their jurisdiction. So it's a regular business. The only thing is like no profit goes back to the shareholders, but
Exactly.
they do make profit. And I'll show you some examples and some case studies how we are dealing with some of the social businesses.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So I believe there is a very common confusion around this thing, which is an NGO or NPO. If it has a social impact, it can be a social enterprise. But to be social business, it has to be making profit and reinvesting the profit into the operations and other principles as well. So it's business
Yep.
again, but in a different way, which has social impact. And we have one more question from Javin, which is, how much is your annual corporate social responsibility budget? How do we select your beneficiary? And can you please cite an example?
All right. So we we do not have a corporate and social responsibility budget because 100% of it is actually working with our kind of social businesses that we support. And I'll talk a little bit more so to give you an idea how it works. As I said, none of it can go out. So the CSR budget works in terms of when you have a corporate which is focusing on profit maximization, and then they set aside an X% of their fund to focus on corporate and social responsibility. Whereas for us, 100% of it is actually corporate and social responsibility,
Exactly.
which
Exactly.
is a good thing.
Exactly. So I
And
think,
that's something we encourage others to do also.
yeah, amazing. So I think we can move forward. We're also having a couple of questions, but would you like to just answer one question, which is, as social business or
Sure.
enterprise is required to pay taxes since they're making profit?
Yes, they are required to pay taxes. In Bangladesh specifically, they are required to pay taxes.
So yeah, I think we have pretty much all the questions here. Let's move on.
All right. So just to kind of give a little bit of kind of information around what are the special characteristics of uh, having an impact investment or the investment mindset. I think the first one is definitely about intention, because in a traditional investment, the investor comes in with a profit mindset, whereas as I said earlier, here the intention is to make social impact first. Obviously, you can get your money back in terms of the investment. There are different types of impact investment also where you can get some profit out of it too, but then again, that's not exactly social business, but it is still impact investment. And also, I think the last one is very important, the impact measurement. is kind of like key to any of the impact investments. We focus a lot on kind of like looking at the theory of change, like, what are the long-term impact we're going to have with this social business. So that are kind of some of the key things that you traditionally don't do on a regular business. And again, like, going back to the other question of like the difference between NGO and NPO and then social business. NGOs also don't go through a business plan in terms of like in a traditional business. They're thinking of not revenue, but revenue in terms of donations. Whereas like uh, uh, social business is thinking about making profit, and the impact investor kind of has to work very closely with the social business. So in terms of like thinking of what is the impact you're going to make, the intentions has to be aligned both by the social business and the investor. And then also you have to have kind of like the range of return expectation, like what you're going to get. A traditional, so we work with a lot of startups, early age startups, who are kind of thinking of social impact. And the difference between us and others who are also incubating and accelerating, they're always looking for the unicorns. What is the next big thing? And for us, we are always focused on like, what are the social challenges? How do we solve these things? And the investments we get, all the impact investors we work with, have also a similar mindset in terms of like what they want to get out of it. I also wanted to kind of like quickly talk about the Grameen kind of family of organizations. And again, like throughout the world, Dr. Yunus has built this huge, I would say, a network of social businesses that are working throughout the world, not just in Bangladesh. However, if we look into Bangladesh only, there about six organizations that we can identify as social businesses. Grameen Danone, for example, and then even Grameen Bank or Grameen Intel Social Business Limited. All of these are kind of social businesses in partnership with Grameen and an international organization. The thing about these, though, these are really big companies, as you know, like Danone or Intel or BASF. They are huge corporations who are partnering with Grameen to start specific social business, focusing on individual areas where they can provide some sort of social impact. And that's where YY Ventures comes in. That's where we step in, because these are again big corporations and coming up with like really big ventures. Whereas we see a lot of youth, especially social entrepreneurs who want to do great things, who have great ideas. Where do they go? Who gives them support? Because a traditional incubator or accelerator is always, as I said, looking for the next unicorn. They are not like too much about the impact. So that's where Ventures come in, because our goal is to build, accelerate, and invest in social businesses. So we work specifically with social entrepreneurs who have great ideas, that are solving real issues, that are dealing with poverty, that are dealing with unemployment, that are dealing with carbon emission. So those are the things we always focus in. And the reason we say like build, accelerate, and invest, because those are kind of like the three areas where YY Venture focuses. And if I can give you a little bit of example, when we talk about build, we have over the years built some of our own ventures. These are fully owned subsidiaries of YY Venture, starting with YY Goshti that Shadman initially talked about, which is an incubator program for social businesses. It's a 4-month-long program that kind of focuses on identifying these young entrepreneurs who are making big impact and who have big ideas, and then taking them through a series of boot camps and mentoring sessions and one-on-one kind of help in terms of like we say seek, shape, and scale of ideas. Because the reason we also say seek is we're always kind of in the community looking for these social entrepreneurs who are coming up with big ideas. And then once they are part of our program, we kind of go through this phase of like, how do we shape this ideas into businesses, specifically into social businesses, and finally, how do they scale? And then that will include like, getting investments for them. So why Goshti focuses solely on kind of like incubating these young entrepreneurs. The next one is Jamroll, which is again like another fully owned subsidiary of ours. It's a design tech company that focuses and works with businesses that are focusing on social impact. So we have clients all over the globe, actually. Again, like social impact organization that need design and technology help. If we talk about our current projects, we are working with Gates Foundation funded startup working in Africa on clean water. So we are building their app, their kind of like design guidelines, their brand identity, and all of that in partnership with them. We are also working with another organization out of Europe that are building a platform for entrepreneurs to learn skills virtually. So these are some type of project that we do under the Jamroll umbrella. And finally, we also have Impact Hub Dhaka. So many of you already know about the Impact Hub network, which is a global network of co-working space and community for entrepreneurs. And we have brought in Impact Hub to Bangladesh, and we run Impact Hub Dhaka and support a bunch of different social businesses throughout this. Our next kind of like part is accelerating, which I talked a little bit about what Goshti does, and we have over the years supported more than 45 startups, and specifically right now we are dealing with we're working on two different projects. One supported by UNDP, it's called Digital Khichdi Challenge (DKC), that focuses on social stigma, and then organizations that are working towards that. So we support that. This year during the pandemic, we have actually incubated 8 startups through that program. We also have a huge program that we run in partnership with Netherlands Enterprise Agency and the Dutch government. And with their support, this year alone, we have incubated 18 startups, and we'll be incubating another 42 in the next 2 years. We have 2 cohorts that we run every year, 10 startups each cohort. And the program is about to incubate 60 startups in the next 3 years. And one thing that I really want to mention over here, because again, like these are very challenging times, especially with the pandemic going on, the focus and the efforts we have seen from the youth during this time, thinking about our basic needs, our basic issues, be it like healthcare, be it environment, it has been amazing. In a traditional year, we have seen more effort this year than in our regular times. The last cohort, for example, where we selected 10 startups, we had 122 startups who applied to our program. And it was so difficult to choose 10 out of them because so many were dealing with issues that really need to be addressed. And our hope, even like today, to all of you who are attending and those of you who are watching it, is to get involved and with us, with others who are kind of in this sector, because again, like, this is a special area that needs a lot of attention. We could only support 10 in the last cohort, but would have loved to support like maybe 50 out of the 122 that applied. And a wide variety of startups who are going through our program right now. So 45 supported so far. And it's not just they're dealing and solving some of the toughest issues of our times. They're also creating jobs. Throughout this 45 kind of ventures, they have kind of created over 1,200 jobs, and they have impacted over 80,000 lives. which is a magnificent achievement for all the startups that we're working with. And our hope is like our kind of network will grow over the years. So that's kind of like how the building part and the accelerated part. And then the last part of what we do is we also invest in social businesses. And again, like, out of all the startups that go through our program, I wish we had an option to support or invest in everyone. And we are kind of going towards that, trying to build our own investment fund. But right now, we invest in some of our ventures in a small way, and try to stay with them throughout the time as they scale, and then we support them as they go bigger. First one that I want to talk a little bit about is called Shishir, which is a clean water project that is solving clean water issues in one of the districts in Bangladesh. And the way it is set up, we are actually working with the local entrepreneur who is kind of driving this whole initiatives. And our goal is more and more entrepreneurs will join this effort. And then finally, we can dream of a world where everyone has access to clean water. I know in 2020, it's really, I would say, kind of, it's a shame that we still have to talk about clean water in 2020, but that's how the things are. Like, we are still far from securing clean water access for everyone. And we hope that Shishir will grow and then join other organizations also who are working on clean water. Next one we want to talk about is Amar Lab. It is again, like, one of the social businesses that's focusing on bringing healthcare to your doorstep. The way they work is like you can just get an Amar Lab service and have someone go to your home, collect your blood sample, take it to the lab, test it, and bring you the results back. And then they are also focusing on solving one of the biggest issues in Bangladesh when it comes to healthcare is people do not get checked up. They're very reactive. They don't proactively do any sort of health checkup. At the same time, if they are also going to a hospital and then the doctors are prescribing tests, it's very difficult to beat the traffic, go over there, get the test done, and then come back and go again to get the report. So they're creating employment through having all this network of phlebotomists who would go and collect samples. They're also solving healthcare from the consumer aspect, and at the same time, they're creating more businesses for the labs where the tests are done. So a good example of how, like, you can run a business, still solve a social issue, and at the end of the day, help people. Next one is Broke. Again, this is one of our newer initiatives that we have supported. They incubated through our spring, actually through a spring cohort at the beginning of the year, and now they're doing a lot of work in terms of upcycling clothing and fashion design. And they have done also a great work during the pandemic. They were one of the early ones who would take upcycled clothes and make reusable masks. And as we know, like, we are all required to wear a mask during this time, but we're again creating a lot of environmental unfriendly masks through, like, disposable masks. And Broke was really quick in terms of creating reusable masks through CDC guidelines, following CDC guidelines, bringing that in Bangladesh. And the best part is, like, one of the question was, like, in terms of like CSR and all of that. And one of the things Broke does, even already it's a social business, but also they have this interesting way of serving the community too, where if you buy a mask, they give one of the masks, one mask to the underserved communities. So again, like, social business, and on top of that, they have made it interesting for people to participate, where again, buying a mask secures a mask for the underserved community. So we're very, very proud of supporting Broke with their venture. And then finally, the last one I want to talk about is Garbage Man. Again, one of our very early graduates of our incubation program and one of the very first startups we invested in. Garbage Man ensures proper waste management, and especially in a country like Bangladesh, where it's highly populated in the Dhaka city itself is the highest densely populated city in the world. So you can imagine the waste and the garbage produced through this. And Garbage Man takes an aim at solving that, again, not from a charity perspective, but how do you make this a business where you are generating profit while doing waste management. They recently are doing great work in the Rohingya refugee camps also. As you know, like the Rohingya crisis, there is about 1.3 million refugees over there, and that also is in a very small area. So that has been generating a lot of kind of waste. And then Garbage Man is partnering with UN organizations to deal with that. So this is again, like, some of the kind of examples of social businesses that we are supporting as YY Ventures. And these are also, again, like solving a social problem, creating profit, and at the same time, like, working with the community and within taking investments and working with impact investments.
So at
All
this
right,
at this
any
point, we
questions?
have some questions if we are good to take. Uh, One very
Sure.
interesting question from Chris is, what are the challenges you are facing on selecting the right early stage startups to invest in, and what are the criteria you use to avoid bias? That's one question. And another question, which is kind of related to the impact investment, which is impact investment the same as ESG investing, which is environmental, social, and governance related sustainable investing? So what are the difference between that? So yeah, one question from Chris and one from Arth Gandhi about the impact investment.
Okay. So we'll start with the recruitment kind of like process in terms, or the selection process. As I said, the selection is very, very difficult because everyone's coming up with great ideas, but we go through a series of processes actually to select those who will be working with. And as I said, like, we only have funding to kind of like, support 10 startups at a time. So we are limited, otherwise we could select more. But first of all, we kind of look into the business idea, how they're aligned with our goals of solving poverty, solving unemployment, or solving carbon emissions. So it has to be aligned with that. So that's our first criteria. The next one is we also look into the profile of the entrepreneur. How much is their commitment towards this? Is this something they will kind of take forward, or is this something like, what's the history of, like, them, like, in terms of their commitment level? So that is, I think, very important because taking an entrepreneurship route is not easy, especially in Bangladesh. Also, I mean, like, there's this mindset of like going into a job and doing that. The path of entrepreneurship is hard no matter wherever you are in the world. So we want to make sure those who are we are working with are kind of like committed towards that. And then so those are some of the things we look at. We also look at what stage they're in, because we are looking for a little bit early stage startups where we can come in with our expertise of, like, how do you set up the social business, how do you think of your customers, how do you think of the initiative you have taken, like, how what does it take to take it from an idea stage to actually a real product or service. So we look at that stage also. Another thing that recently we have started including is in the last two cohorts, especially, is you have to have a female co-founder in your co-founding team. So that is again a very important thing for us. You have to have gender balance in there also. So those are some of the criteria we see, and then we actually go through some phases. So we do an initial selection out of the, for example, the 122, we went down to 76, and then again, like we went down to like another 20, and we also have independent kind of juries that we bring in like to help us during this process. And then once we have our kind of like the I think we will go down up to 20, and then we invite all of them to come to a pitching event where they can like talk about their ventures, they can talk about their ideas, where they are, what they have done so far. And we again like invite a group of kind of like people, experts from our communities to come in and help us kind of judge those. And then from that, we go to 10. So since there are a lot of kind of external folks involved and a lot of kind of transparent criteria, we have the biasness is not a problem, but it is a problem to say no to people who really want to do good things in the world. So we always kind of encourage them to kind of try the next time. And sometimes we do go beyond like our initial phase and then and try to help them out through our different programs we have. Impact Hub Dhaka, for example, we regularly offer trainings over there for entrepreneurs. Those are open to all. We also have different organization hosting events over there, and our partners too. For example, we work with UNDP Youth Collab. We invite those who have applied to us kind of go tour and then apply to their program. We have partnered with Bridge for Billions, which is an online portal for startups. And then those who kind of like did not make it to our kind of 10 selected startups, we have asked them to apply to Bridge for Billions also, and we have kind of worked a partnership with them to kind of refer startups to their platform.
Great. So we have quite a lot of questions coming in. So there's a one big...
Which is really good because I'm almost done with the slides, so we can kind of like
that's great.
Dive into the questions.
Let's take some time to answer this interesting question. So from Lakshika Veerasinghe, one question is how do you encourage investors and private parties to engage more in impact investing, and how well the governments will look at the impact investings or impact investments by private parties which lead to PPP? That's one part of the question. So how do we encourage the investors to get involved in the impact investment side, and how well the governments will look at impact investments by the private parties, which might lead to the PPPs or public-private partnership potentially?
So to start with the first one, we are always like in talks with investors to kind of like tell them about our story and how it is in their or in everyone's benefit to kind of invest in social businesses and impact investments, because the world has is it like honestly, to be to be fair, like the pandemic has helped the social business movement a lot. We have seen a lot of interest now for people coming in and like kind of showing their interest to work with us. Previously, we were kind of like always, as I said, like always meeting with them, kind of telling them about like the idea of social business and impact investment. We have seen some interest, but now like I think a lot of people kind of realize that, hey, we need to focus on this, because we hear the term build back better from everyone globally. And it is true, like we got an opportunity to build back better because our previous ways were not working, and that's why we are here. That's why healthcare is failing. That's why food safety is failing. That's why environment issues are happening. So that has given us some more talking points to go and talk to people. And during this pandemic also, we realized that we need to come up with our own funds. And we have already started this initiative. We have been talking with the Dutch embassy in Bangladesh, and because we have gotten great support from them, we have been talking with our global partners in terms of like, how do we not only just kind of help people do impact investment and bring investors to this area, but also how can we build our own investment fund so that over the time that grows and we can continue supporting the startups that go through our process, or even like, can be a startup that did not come through our incubation process, but is a social business and really doing great work, and we want to be able to support them also. So that's kind of have been our methodology for now, like, invite them and then show them the importance, at the same time building our own fund.
Exactly. I think there's
And
another kind of
there
like
was a question
related
about
question.
government also.
Yeah. So that's about most of the times developing country governments hesitate to enter into PPPs with the private sector, and they do not encourage private participation in major developments. How do you think
Mhm.
Bangladesh can overcome this challenge, and which will set an example for the developing world overall?
Yeah. I think in Bangladesh, like the whole concept of private-public partnership has already, like, been in a better path than what it used to be, because of Bangladesh moving into a middle-income country, because donor agencies are not kind of like, looking at Bangladesh the same way, and the government kind of understands that. And since we work with a lot of NGOs also, we understand that the government also wants to kind of shift from this sort of kind of philanthropic donations and move more towards a public-private partnership methodology. And as a result, we are seeing great progress when it comes to impact investment. We are working with the Swiss Development Agency, for example, who have brought in a huge program called Biniyog Briddhi, focusing on impact investments. They are this year already investing in 10 startups, and they have started kind of working with the ecosystem builders in Bangladesh. They have selected 6 ecosystem builders who work with different startups, and YY Ventures is one of them. And now they have started a voucher program where startups can kind of get ready for impact investments, because they are traditionally not equipped with the tools needed for impact investments. And through the voucher program, many startups are actually getting these services through the ecosystem builders. YY Ventures, for example, is providing the voucher, is part of the voucher scheme and providing these services, like creating an impact investment strategy for this startup, kind of creating their impact measurement tools and all of these things, which are kind of like good sign. And these are happening because of the shift that the government is also promoting, and also the other development partners are promoting, and startups are also looking into this right now. As you those who are kind of like looking into the Bangladesh kind of sector in the recent months, like Shop Up, for example, secured a huge funding of 22 million in Series A. A lot of other kind of startups focused on social impact are also securing kind of seed funding and then different stages of funding. So those are really great signs. And I think the government itself, they have also started something called Startup Bangladesh Limited, with a huge fund to focus on startups, in particular working with social impact.
Great. There is one question from Farhan. I believe it's pretty much answered already, which is how social entrepreneurs can attract the investors to investing without expecting profit. Is it by showing the social impact of that impact investment and so on? Yeah.
We
So
did talk about it a lot, but I just want to kind of like reiterate that uh, I think like it depends a lot on investors also. Like startups in their current form, I know like they're already like trying to uh, work in very small resources, and they are trying to kind of attract investors, but in many times we see like there are lots of roadblocks in terms of for them to convince an investor to kind of like invest in something without profit is kind of difficult. So that's where we come in and we try to take the burden off of them, and we work with investors and tell them like, hey, why don't you look into social investment, impact investment, and then we kind of try to match them with specific startups. But yes, startups can do that, but it is a bit difficult for them to kind of approach those impact investors.
exactly. So there is one question from Dr. Eric, which is, what are the common challenges social businesses faced, and what advices would you offer to the failing social businesses?
We don't actually say that they have failed, but because everything is a learning, honestly, and for us, like we do kind of promote a fail fast, fail more philosophy. Whereas once you are in this path, we have seen social entrepreneurs, they are very much driven by purpose, and that kind of separates them from the rest, because like if they kind of fail in one initiative, we work with them like how can they pivot, how can they come up with and change either like maybe the business model or maybe what they initially started with. So that kind of goes through a few phases, and that is something that we also look into in our process of helping them. But there are a lot of challenges actually in terms of like social business in general, especially if I think from a Bangladesh perspective. Social business is still new in terms of the concept. Registration wise, you have to go really kind of as a when you register as a business, there is no social business registration. You have to kind of incorporate as a regular business, and then kind of put specific terms in your kind of registration documents, in your memorandum and everything, to make sure that you are a social business. So those challenges are there from a operation registration perspective. But from an operational perspective, also, I think there are challenges in terms of uh, people still don't understand the difference between NGO and social business and social enterprise and for-profit business. So these are still newer terms. And as I said, like earlier, different locations, these terms are used in different ways. So those issues are still there. So those are some of the challenges. And another challenge I would say that we talked a little bit about is investments, right? As it's very hard to get traditional investors invest into social businesses. Social investments, on the other hand, or impact investments, are still new in Bangladesh. We're kind of seeing a progress in there, but then again, startups are not ready to kind of receive impact investment, because it requires a special sort of like documentation, special sort of kind of arrangement. So that's where like programs like the voucher scheme can be really helpful. Through the voucher scheme from the Binu Britti program, we're helping two startups right now, and these services can be expensive because you have to work with a startup for around like at least like 6 months in order to set them up onto how do you measure impact, because many of the startups, they want to do good things, they are like providing great service, but impact investors want specific types of impact measurement tools to be integrated that usually they don't have. So you have to work on those things. So yeah, it is a process, but we're making progress, and I hope more investors would come in this area. But at the same time, more startups will also kind of get used to this sort of investment and be prepared to take impact investment.
Great. There is one related question, which is what are the challenges might make it difficult for other social businesses to scale up? I believe it's about also scaling up within the country, and maybe we can share a bit about cross-border idea scaling as well. So what has been your experience regarding that?
Yeah. When it comes to scale up, I think like, social business are no different than a regular business. A regular startup has many different challenges, and something that we want to work with for longer term, specifically projects like, as I say, like we work with the UNDP on a 4-month program, but we want to extend that longer because like once they graduate, they need a lot of help scaling up. Could be cross boundary, but within even like one location also scaling up requires a lot of operational support. Um, for example, like in many times we see like those who come up with great ideas, they're innovators, but when it comes to management, for example, there is a lot of gap between like understanding like how to build a proper team, how to have operational efficiency. So all those things require help. So we have created this long list of kind of areas where we want to support, and we support some of the organizations. And in this regard, we kind of like try to take more of a like a path of Y Combinator, where like once you are part of this program, we can are partners rather than just like helping you incubate, because they need more support once they have a real product or service in the real world. And that's when the real challenges come in, like how do I take my uh, effort like and scale it up. If we talk about the challenges, for example, if we take like Amar Lab, for example, one of the case studies that we have shown, like they've been doing great work in Dhaka right now, but they want to scale up to other cities. So we are working with them. How do you find partners to go work in other cities, work with different like diagnostic centers in other cities that they can partner with? And then the operational side, like how do you have uh, the tools, right tools, so that you can monitor your business as it grows. We are looking into funding opportunities for them because you will need funds to grow beyond Dhaka. And then we're also looking into and working with them, how do they go beyond Bangladesh? Because this is a problem that is not Bangladesh only. It's healthcare, and accessibility to healthcare is a problem globally. So how can we help with those? So yes, there are lots of different types of support needed throughout this, specifically on the operational side.
Great. So I believe we'll be having more questions, but from my perspective, I'd like to, talk a bit more about, as we have been talking a lot about building back better. In the web, we have been talking about the Great Reset, and then we are talking about a world of 3 zeros, which has been a movement even long before the COVID itself, which talks about zero poverty, zero unemployment, and zero net carbon emissions. And exactly this has been the goal of YY Ventures long before the COVID crisis. And from my personal understanding, what I see is that all these 3 zeros directly or indirectly have impact on the SDGs, all of these SDGs. So would you elaborate a bit more about, for a better post-COVID world, how this is important, not just for the social enterprises, social businesses going through YY Venture, also all the social businesses overall to focus on these 3 zeros while also keeping the principles of social business in mind. So yeah, please.
I think it is very important that we look into this, and as you say, like things like Build Back Better or the Great Reset. Um, every kind of catastrophe is actually an opportunity also if you look into it, because this gave us this window into looking at some of the core aspects of development, and then not just like, and it's not just the NGOs or the developing organizations looking into this, because SDGs, although it was designed as a program, like as a concept for the entire world, for-profit and non-profit organizations, but we still see like only NGOs and development organizations talking about SDGs, and it needs to kind of go beyond that, and hopefully now, like, you know, everyone will kind of like look into this and kind of revisit some of the things. uh, and social businesses more and more, like, it doesn't, like, you know, it's not the ones only that are going through us, but everyone who has ideas, any sort of social entrepreneurs need to look into this more closely and revisit like where we need to work. If I give you one example, you know, from Bangladesh, like one of the things we're seeing on the field from our development partners, um, pre-COVID, we were doing really great in terms of malnutrition. I know of one organization, SPRIA, for example. They have been working with underserved communities for a long, long time. And in 2016, the areas where they work, they kind of announced them as malnutrition free. And they kind of like, you know, focused on other areas. However, like within 2 months of this pandemic, they have seen almost like 20% of children under 5 kind of going under the malnutrition zone. And then now it's actually increasing. It has gone over 30%. So they need to revisit these areas. So which means that social entrepreneurs who are looking into building social businesses, they need to look into all these areas like that they were thinking of before, and the new areas that are kind of coming up due to the pandemic, where we might have had solved those issues, but now we need to revisit them and come up with ideas that really solve these things. And again, like the 3 zeros are a good guiding principle, because you really need to focus on poverty. You really need to focus on unemployment, which is a huge issue, especially post-pandemic. And then obviously we also need to be careful about the environment, and how do we make it a better place for future generations. So I would expect, and I would actually request those who are attending or those who are watching it on Facebook, and others also, to come ahead and kind of like set aside the regular concept of business and profit maximization, but look into the world in a new way, and focus on building social businesses that really solve the toughest issues of our times.
Great. We'll have some more questions. I have one point to discuss a bit about. So when we hear the name of Grameen families, or when we talk about social business, the name of microfinance comes parallel to it. Even though microfinance has started and then the idea of social business followed, would be great if you could share a bit more about, microfinance. What is microfinance itself? Um, Maybe many of us know that, but for a better clarification, and
Yeah.
how it started, things like that.
So microfinance traditionally started with like, as I was showing earlier, like when a really small amount of loans were given to women to start their own business, and then so that they can invest it. And the interesting part was everyone was returning back the money. Traditionally, the small entrepreneurs, they cannot go to traditional banks. That's how microfinance started. But microfinance itself, I think, over the last 40 years has evolved so much. We even see like kind of large scale, kind of small businesses also taking loans right now, which are again like not traditional microfinance, because they are pretty large amounts. But microfinance is pretty widespread, and then the NGOs, especially in Bangladesh, have really like, taken it to the next level of supporting small and micro entrepreneurs. And at the same time, a lot of businesses that are not traditionally welcomed by traditional banks. So we see a lot of effort going on in there. But at the same time, I personally think that microfinance has come a long way, and now, like I would say, like we need to focus more on what's next in terms of that. Also, like how do we break people out of the chain from loans and get into like this sort of impact investments and other things. How can we partner up? There are a lot of impact investors do come in the microfinance part also, but that's not in Bangladesh because we are restricted by some local laws. But I see it happening other places. But I would say, like, uh, we should encourage more and more impact investors also coming in and work with this small and micro entrepreneurs and see how we can support them.
That's great. So we have one question from Wendy, which is, how do you deal with people who are cynical of investors, who maybe have had to deal with multi-level clientelism?
Yeah. So I think, like, cynicism itself doesn't take us anywhere. Honestly, I think, like, we do get uh, a lot of, like, we already have a lot of challenges in terms of kind of uh, promoting the concept of social business to investors in general. But obviously, there will always be investors who would only look into profit maximization. And I don't expect investors overnight all kind of moving into the impact investment world or anything. But at the same time, we need to be kind of cognizant of those who do make the switch, because it is, I would say, it is the right thing to do. It is a noble thing to do when you move from a regular investor and become an impact investor. So for me, like, I would like to appreciate them who has taken the switch. And I would ask, like, everyone who's like dealing with social businesses or social enterprises or working with impact investors to kind of appreciate the effort that they have been making. I know a lot of our startups that we work with are very grateful for the funds they have received, for the impact investments they have received from impact investors, and they're doing great work with that.
Great. Hope that answers the question. So I would also like to hear a bit from you that you have been working with social businesses and social initiatives overall for last many years. So I believe the obstacles in this case is different and differs a lot from country to country, region to region. But in general, what would be your suggestion for the policy level to make social businesses widespread, make it easy for people to come up with a social business, register it, start it, and run it in general. So what are the suggestions you think the policy level should be keeping in mind in general over the world when it comes to social business?
I think you already answered your question, so which is great, because I think the key part is making it easier. Because right now it is not easy to set up a social business, especially in this region. It is extremely difficult. So you have to choose between like an NGO and a traditional business. So there is no way to set up a social business, and you have to work really hard, go through the very like long legal process to do it. And even after that, since it is not registered as a social business, you can anytime decide, oh, you know what, like I'm like your investors, or maybe like can and push you, or like others, the co-founders might have a change of heart, and you can change that. So it is very hard to do a strictly like a setup for a social business. So I would say, like from a policy level, actually to make it easier to set up a social business. So that would be one of the great things that we can expect. The other thing is also when it comes to impact investments and investments in general, it is difficult to invest in social business in general. So a lot of the social business or like impact investment financial instruments are not available in Bangladesh or like some of the other regions in the world. So there's a lot of work we can do that will kind of help promote that and make it easier for investors to get involved in this sort of ventures.
Great. So I'll have just one last question, but before that, I believe we have some last slides to share. And we have one question from Retnam, which is, my question is, how can we include social entrepreneurship in the curriculum within the mainstream education? Amazing. That's a very interesting question and also spoke my mind. So yeah, up to you.
Thank you. And this is really a great question. And this is again something that is not part of our curriculum, that is not part of a mainstream idea. And we see many entrepreneurs who actually want to do these things have these ideas in mind that, hey, I don't want to maximize profit. I really want to do some good. At the same time, I want to build a business. But they're actually not aware of the concept of social business because they have never been exposed to that. So I think for it would be really great if it is included in the curriculum, but at the same time, with some examples of what you can do, why it is important to build social businesses, and at the same time, what it means to run one, and then from an entrepreneurship perspective also, what do you expect and that will create the right expectation from investors, from the society, from the community members, for entrepreneurs. So all of this can happen when we can include that along with some good case studies that will showcase the power of social business.
Exactly, because for me also, like growing up and going through the education system, the first time I came to know more about entrepreneurship when I was in the last 1 year of the school, and then more into social business and this aspect when I read Professor Yunus's book, came across people like Shojiba and others to understand, okay, this is a vast field and it has a huge impact. So I would like to see, it's coming into the mainstream education system, especially in this part of the world. Maybe in many parts of the world there are. So what about, learning more about social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general from the schools? I believe that would really help. And having a small entrepreneurship lab in all the schools would be a bold imagination I would have. So we have one question from Nico, which is, what are the incentives that can be put in place by social entrepreneur accelerators to encourage young people to take part in social entrepreneurship? And in your personal opinion, would it be possible to be implemented?
I think so. Like the incentive is definitely like you are doing something great for the earth, for your communities. You're solving one of the most kind of toughest challenge in the community, in the society. So that itself is, I would say, like a great incentive. But the other thing also is uh, they would get more encouraged in terms of if there was more support for it. And I think that is happening, that has started happening, but we need to do more. We need to have a more inclusive environment where they don't feel like they're struggling against the mainstream. So that kind of sometimes uh, gets really tough on them. So I would say, like, the more of a friendly environment we can create for them, the better. And I think that is possible.
Exactly. I think it all has to start from the households and the community levels as well, right? Like coming from such backgrounds, we were expected to become doctor or engineer or lawyer, and then going into entrepreneurship or especially working in social impact driven entrepreneurship. That's again a misunderstood idea, but then which is really important, especially for the emerging countries around the world. So how do we change this mindset within the family and the communities? That's also a challenge, I believe. One question from Chris is, are the doors open for startups from all over the world? and Africa that align to your mission and purpose to access support and form joint ventures from the uh, pool of your portfolio. So huge interest from Africa. And what do you
Yeah.
think about it?
Yeah, of course, yes, we do, and would love that. We are already working on a project, building some partnership in Central African Republic. So we are always open to building partnerships, not just with us, but we also want to facilitate partnerships with startups that have graduated from our program. So would love to have a discussion on that and follow up.
Great. Vince has one question. Are communities active participants in the operation and decision making of the social businesses? So do communities actively participate in the social business decision making process?
It depends. It depends on the type of the venture, on the type of social business. If it is working with a specific community, yes, they should be involved because they are part of the process. So again, like for us, like we always try to take a human-centered design approach where we put the people we are serving, the people the venture is working with as at the center of everything, designing the whole venture. So yes, they should be.
Great. Um, So we are almost at the end of the discussion today, as we have shared pretty much all the key insights and the secret recipe of YY Ventures on fostering social businesses. I have one personal question from you, which is, if you have to think very boldly and have to project the future in next 10 years, for example,
Yep.
how do you like to see the growth of YY Ventures and the global social business movement from the policy level to the grassroots levels? So yeah, what would be your
Um, I think for us, it's a great question, and then brings me to my last slide. Actually, is I see like us moving into more of a global platform and working with entrepreneurs all over, and then we want to kind of harness the energy and creativity of the youth that we see everywhere we work with, and bring in more like the power of technology into this, because again like we need to scale up fast and then work on these very important issues and transform like regular business into social business. That's also like one of our prediction. In the next 10 years we will see more businesses. We already see like regular business shareholders even asking them, what are you doing for environment, what are you doing for the society? So we will see more and more kind of businesses moving into the social business area, and finally like ensuring like good governance. That would be another key area for us to work on in the next few years. So that's pretty much, I would say, like where we are and how we can actually create a world of three zeros.
amazing? So yeah, that pretty much answers all my questions, and I believe we are almost running to the end of the discussion today. We have maybe 1 minute or so. So I'd like to thank again to Mr. Tazin and to YY Goshti and YY Venture family for making it happen. And I hope it was an interactive and insightful session. For me personally, it was actually literally a masterclass learning about social business and the insights here. And I believe we will be distillating this knowledge into action, and be in touch with YY Ventures and with Good City Foundation. Reach us out, let us know your idea and see how we can collaborate on that. So yeah, thank you so much, Tazin Shadid. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, Shadman, and thank you all the organizers for this opportunity.